Let me figure out if I can turn this camera around. Okay, we're just getting set up here to do some experiments. Get the camera set up. We're going to be live streaming today on YouTube. There's some interesting stuff here. Alright, I'm going to start by getting the hot plate warmed up. I'm going to start with a temperature of 115 degrees Celsius. Remember, this is Alchemy of Steven School. Do not try this at home, not for consumption. Sorry for the background noise. I do live in a neighborhood and there are neighbors. There is traffic going by. Now the hot plate's warming up. I'm going to start getting set up here to do some alchemy experiments. Alright, I've got a big mug of coffee. Let's make sure the volume is turned up. Hot plate's warming up. Let's start getting some things ready here. Now I'm going to work on a couple of different experiments here today and talk about a few more. So this little thing I made here, I took paraffin wax and sulfur and melted them together and made this. Now I ground up some iron pyrite in a mortar and pestle. I didn't ground it really fine as the painters grind the colors like it says in the writings of Theophrastus Paracelsus, but I did grind the bulky, chunky pieces much smaller than they were, and then I heated it up, and I'm still working on a video concerning that, that I'm recording bits and pieces of it on a different camera to make a video that'll be released later. But we're going to work on that today while it's here, see what it does. Just put that on the back burner. So I want to see if molten sulfur unites with iron pyrite, or if it dissolves it, or both. I want to see what happens. Could it be they unite when the sulfur is in molten form? Kind of like a wet path of alchemy, so to speak. So there's that. And then I have another one, a different experiment that I'm going to set up that's similar, but it's going to use the sulfur and the iron pyrite without any type of wax. And one of the reasons wax comes up in alchemy is because some of the old alchemical manuscripts suggested that the philosopher's stone must be wrapped in wax. So that's rather interesting, because my research indicates that wax was used in metallurgy in primitive times. It's still used in metallurgy. Alright, I've got a big mug of coffee. Let me get some more parts and stuff out here. Ordinary sulfur. Remember, do not try this at home. Fumes from burning sulfur can be toxic, is what I've been told. And I'm not trying to burn the sulfur. In old alchemical manuscripts, I remember reading burning of sulfur must be avoided. Iron pyrite. I did grind it. It's still a bit chunky. I need to get a new glass mortar and pestle so I can do a second grind, getting it more fine. But for basic experiments, this shall be fine in my opinion. Because I want to see what happens, what the sulfur does to the pyrite. How do they react together in heat? Does one dissolve the other? Do they unite together? Okay, so my research indicates that the melting point of sulfur, it ranges from 113 to 116 degrees Celsius, roughly 235 to 240 degrees Fahrenheit. So this hot plate is measured in Celsius. So I've got it set at 115 degrees Celsius. It should melt the sulfur. So that's just a starting point. If it doesn't melt it there, then I'll just have to turn it up a bit. It does appear that it is up to the temperature. It is hot. Remember, do not try this at home. Alchemy of Steven School. Not for consumption. There are flies out here today. I apologize for that. Can't help that. They may be looking for food. This is not food for them. I guess I should get some Venus flytrap type plants for my. Let's see how long they survive out here. This is my cast iron mortar and pestle that I've had for many years now. Still have it. Interesting. I don't see the sulfur melting too well yet. I'm just gonna increase the heat by 5 degrees. And see, just increase it slowly. I don't want to burn the sulfur. I don't want it to catch on fire either. Another experiment that I want to start is I want to find out if the heat of an electric hot plate will get hot enough to calcine iron pyrite. I'm not sure that it will or won't. In the past, I've done it with fire. I think there is a slight reaction occurring in the sulfur. I'm going to give it another 5 degrees of heat. We're at 120 degrees Celsius. I've increased it to 125. Ooh, I think I got one of those flies. I like watching Breaking Bad, and I'm remembering, this is reminding me of the episode where Walter White and Jesse Pinkman, or in the laboratory under the laundromat, and there's a contamination, and it turns out to be a fly, and they go through a huge ordeal trying to eliminate the contamination, but finally, in the end, they get it. They succeed. I can see how a fly would be a serious issue because it could potentially contaminate my coffee, and that would not be good. The sulfur is not molten yet. It's also not smoking. I'm gonna give it 5 degrees more heat. Alright, so I've got another little cast iron skillet. It's 6 inches, 6-inch cast iron skillet, basically an egg pan. There's a local store that was having these on sale for $4.99 a piece, so I decided to get 3 of them for my alchemy experiments. Putting iron pyrite in here, even though we're on low heat, I do want to calcine this iron pyrite. Do not try this at home. But since I do have some heat going here, it's not a high heat. I want to start it on the low heat just to see if I get any results, any reactions over the different levels of heat, starting with the lower heat. So I'm just going to leave it on the back burner. But in the future, I want to work on, moving forward, I want to start working on calcining that material. And eventually I'll probably move it up to a gas burner. So, the sulfur is not melting. It's not molten. It actually looks like it's starting to do something, maybe. I'm going to give it 5 degrees. We're at 130 degrees Celsius. I've moved it to 135 degrees Celsius. Doing the upgrades in heat slowly by degrees, because if I make haste and turn it up quickly, that could potentially damage an experiment. Alright, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn it up. We're at 135 degrees, so I'm gonna give it 5 degrees more. 140 degrees Celsius. Now this hot plate, I bought it used on eBay, and they told me it was in like brand new condition. But when I got it, I found out it had been cleaned and repainted. Um, I don't think it was in brand new condition, so I'm not sure of the calibrations on the temperature. It does work, it does get hot. I don't think it was in the condition that it was advertised, though. I think it was not quite as good as all that. I'm trying to stuff a strip of paper in here because I see something shiny. I'm not sure if it's liquid under the white top of the hot plate. And there's no reason that this should be wet at all. The magnetic stirrer part of the hot plate is what really caught my attention when I bought this thing, because when I turned it on, it didn't come with the magnetic stir bar, so I had to buy those separately. But when I turn it on, it makes a unusual sound, like worn, like something's worn or something. Let's see if we can hear it. It does. It sounds really weak. It doesn't sound powerful at all. The magnetic stir bar in this thing, the magnetic stir function is not, in my opinion, it's not 100%. If I had to guess just by the sound of it, I'd say it's probably below 50%. Like it's really, really worn. Alright, we got another fly. Let's see if we can get him with the swatcher. I see a color change caught my eye, just out of my peripheral vision at the bottom down here. And now I'm catching a whiff, a sulfur smell. Down here at the bottom, the sulfur appears to be darkening in color, like it's becoming more orangish colored. If that's the case, that indicates that the heat is starting to take effect. Perhaps we're getting towards the melting point. Yep. Oh yeah, it's starting to melt. It's starting to melt. Let's get it on there. Get it on there. I'm gonna turn the heat down by 5 degrees. It's at 140 Celsius. Turning it down to 135. I don't want to burn the sulfur. I just want to melt it. My idea here is to melt the sulfur, begin casting in the iron pyrite, just keep it in molten fusion, and observe any reactions or changes that I see. Strictly observe. Alright, the material is semi-molten. I think, let's see, move it towards the center of the hot plate a little bit more and see if that helps. It appears to be melting gradually. Like warm butter. But you know what? I'm thinking I need to regain that 5 degrees that I subtracted. I'm gonna go ahead and recover the 5 degrees and move it back to 140 degrees Celsius. Because down here at the bottom, the material that melted, it looks like the very outer edges of it may have re-solidified. No, it seems to be melting a bit better since I've recovered that 5 degrees Celsius that was subtracted earlier. It seems to be, the melting seems to be increasing. It is increasing. Beginning to melt faster, more thoroughly, becoming more liquid, more of a darker color, more of a golden color. So what I'm theoretically really studying here is the reactions between the sulfur and the iron pyrite in different applications. And in alchemy, they have a thing called multiplication. In the writings of Michael Sindavogius, or writings, the New Chemical Light attributed to him, he suggests, I think it was in the New Chemical Light, it could have been one of his other writings, but somewhere in his writings, hang on. Anyway, somewhere in old alchemy writings, attributed if I remember correctly, attributed to Michael Synagogius. He mentioned something about multiplication, where he said the multiplier is the second substance and not the first. So I'm applying that to my experiment here. I want to see if I can multiply iron pyrite by increasing the sulfur content. So if I melt the sulfur and add the iron pyrite, that could be construed as a wet path alchemy experiment. An experiment in the wet path of alchemy, because this is molten into a liquid, then that's wet. Now, in reversing it, let's see, as I've done in this little frying pan in the back over here, this one, I heated the iron pyrite first, good and hot. And if I recall, I heated that approximately, I want to say it was approximately 340 degrees Celsius when I heated that iron pyrite. Okay, and once I got it hot, ground it up first in the mortar and pestle, is what I did, but once I got it hot, I started breaking up chunks of this material here with a butter knife. This is the material I made by melting paraffin wax and sulfur together, okay, and then letting it cool. So I broke up chunks of this, some of it broke up into smaller chunks and some into powder, and I used those smaller pieces in powdery type, casting it on the hot iron pyrite. So in my opinion, that constitutes a dry path experiment, because the iron pyrite was dry and hot, and I cast the material onto it, which then melted and became liquid. So it's basically, the two experiments are very similar, but they are reversed. One is, in my opinion, a wet path experiment, the other a dry path. And the difference is one has paraffin wax and the other does not. And this is interesting because a couple different types of waxes have come up in my chemical researches, and other tidbits. Like, I've come across them in primitive metallurgy, where different types of waxes were said to have been used for different purposes. Rather interesting. Now, the center of that sulfur, the center of mass, is quite liquid and molten. So I'm tempted to start throwing casting the iron pyrite into it. Perhaps I should wait till it's all molten, all liquid molten. And the reason I'm doing 5-degree increments is because my hot plate seems to be calibrated in 5-degree increments. It doesn't let me adjust by 1 degree. It jumps up in 5-degree increments. Now, the color changes in there are interesting. The frying pan is rather hot. It's interesting when the sulfur melts. The color becomes more like the color of gold. And the little pieces are still dropping into the molten area and melting. I think we're going to get a good melt on this sulfur. So I'm wondering, when sulfur melts, if it has any type of caustic effect or dissolving effect. any purifying or cleansing effect, or how it will react. I'm expecting to see some interesting results. Not 100% sure, but I think there will be some interesting color changes, interesting reactions. And then I based this on my previous experiments, and also the experiment I'd been working on in this frying pan in the back, which I've been recording segments of that work on a different camera, storing it on a little memory stick for a future video I'm working on. Seeing the interesting results, and that just gives me the impression that when the sulfur melts and I cast in the pyrite, I think there's going to be some interesting things, and I think I'm going to have to probably begin, if they start uniting, I'm probably going to have to begin raising the heat more. Because when sulfur, in my understanding, when sulfur and iron unite, the qualities of both materials are changed. This, in my opinion, the sulfur joins the realm of the metals, but the iron is changed. Like it doesn't want to rust anymore. Like that is affected. And I'm wondering if it affects the magnetism of it. I need to look around for a magnet and see if iron pyrite will stick to it. And that sulfur is melting better and better. Just checking to make sure my experiment is actually in the camera. It'd be terrible to record video all day and then play it back and discover it wasn't even in the picture. But it is. It's mostly molten in the center. The outer edges of the sulfur still have some solid areas, but they are increasingly moving towards the melting point as the molten mass in the center is expanding. The wind's picking up a bit. Alright. It's the day after Thanksgiving. And I see people's guests are leaving that stayed overnight. They're taking home plates of food. A nice orange color in the molten sulfur. I can smell it just barely. I see turning the glass may help, because my hot plate does not appear to be level. My table is not level. I placed a wedge under the table so it won't rock and knock everything over. The liquid sulfur is a nice golden yellow. Still melting a bit around the edges. If this big chunk in the front would melt, that should give us better visibility from the camera angle, and then I could maybe begin. The colors are very interesting. Sulfur goes through interesting color changes. Different changes like the texture or shape of the matter. Still melting. I'm seeing a very interesting color of orangish gold. Still melting. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give it 5 degrees more heat. It's at 140 Celsius. I'm climbing 145 Celsius. Gently climbing. I want a good melt. around to this side for a bit. All right. You know what just came across my mind? Our Balneum Marie, our water bath, our secret water bath of the wise. Water bath of the wise. Could this be what alchemists, what we're talking about? I'm going to go to 150. 150. 150 degrees Celsius. The term the secret water bath of the wise is coming to mind. This is it. Just that it's coming to mind. You know what I may need to do is to get my glasterine rod. See if I can just reach in there and push the sulfur on the edges. It's gotten rather hard. Interesting. Look at that. Like beeswax. Look at the crystalline sparkles in the sulfur. I mentioned earlier that when I've experimented with sulfur, I've seen color changes in it. And around the edges, the sulfur that's gathered up has become hard. It was soft like a powder, but in little tiny pellets, but easily crushable like powder, and fairly easily meltable. But now the texture of them seems to have solidified. Crystalline, like crystals are forming in the sulfur. Due to heat. Okay, so we've got somewhat of our melt going on. I think I'm going to give it a little bit of, you know what, iron pyrite. This brings to mind another tidbit that I read a long time ago. from some old alchemical manuscript. Um, it said you must give our old one gold. You must give gold to our old one to devour, or it will attack the glass. I see a reaction occurring. Let's try to carefully bring the camera closer. I might as well take the funnel out there. I don't want to melt it. It looks to me like there's a reaction beginning between the two. And you know what's interesting? In the writings of alchemy, the old alchemical manuscripts, they talk about stuff like gold dissolves in this water because it was this water. And that's interesting because iron and pyrite is iron and sulfur. So sulfur melts. It's a water, right? Like a water. So it kind of reminds me of this. Perhaps the fool's gold, iron pyrite is called fool's gold, um, will melt in the. Will it melt in the water because it was this water? I think what I'm gonna do is turn up the heat again by 5 degrees. I'm at 150 degrees Celsius. Should I turn up the heat? I see what appears to be a mild reaction going slowly. I'm gonna give it 5 degrees. Okay, I'm at 155 degrees Celsius on the temperature gauge. I'm thinking, just by guessing without researching, but I'm thinking that a water bath, a balneum marie temperature, 150 degrees to 170 degrees sounds about right for a temperature range, and that's just off the top of my head without researching or verifying it. So if I consider this to be a balneum marie or like a secret water bath, then That might be a good temperature range, and that fits. That seems to fit with what's going on in my glass as far as the sulfur melting. I'm thinking that as the sulfur and iron pyrite are added together, the temperature needed to melt may increase. Which reminds me of another alchemical term that I've come across in old alchemy manuscripts. Was that this one that said they learn to withstand the fire together. They learn to endure the heat together. They learn to withstand the fire together. I also remember reading old alchemy manuscripts where they talk about cleansing material, washing it clean, and writings stating that the blackness hinders the fusion. Now, that's interesting. When I grind iron pyrite, breaking down the elements, it's almost as if there's a black powder in there. It looks like more of the sulfur has melted, but still not all of it. It looks like it's still melting slowly around the edges. You know what I think I will do is turn the glass and add more pyrite because it's separated in the middle there. And this kind of reminds me of the old sayings about the sun and moon in alchemy. From here, it kind of looks like a sun and moon. So I want to get a little better mix. Just turning it stirs it up a bit. I can kind of smell the sulfur more. I think I'm going to subtract 5 degrees from the heat. Going back to 150, I don't want smoke. I see opaqueness beginning here. I saw a whiff of some type of fume come out there. I want to avoid all that and just keep this material in fusion so I can see the reactions without burning my experiment. I'm going to add a little bit more of the iron pyrite as soon as I have a little coffee, a little more coffee. Oh, interesting. Interesting. Look at this. Look at all that smoke down there. I don't know what that is. could be somebody barbecuing. It's a lot of smoke. I don't really smell it though. I don't know what that is. Alright, so anyway, I've added more iron pyrite to my experiment. I might as well retrieve the funnel. Let's mix it up a bit here. I guess next time I set up an experiment here, I need to bring out a level and make sure that my hot plate is level. Well, whatever's going on with that smoke, it seems to have died down. Must be a barbecue. Alright, there we go. Okay, now that I suddenly looked back quickly to my experiment, I see a color change. I see a darkening, which is interesting because, you know, in alchemy, the green lion is something that we come across a lot. In researching alchemy, there's pictures of green lions, writings of green lions, but the matter seems to be actually greening, turning more green, like the color that I've seen in my many experiments over the years, doing the metal acetate, working on the metal acetate path of alchemy with iron pyrite. My green lion that I've come across, it has that distinct color and waxy appearance. And I actually have another glass string rod that I want to bring out because of this. I'm going to show it. Sorry, Belzy. You're good for a minute. Okay. Okay, so some of the material that was clumped on here seems to have fallen off, but when I was working on the experiment with the frying pan in the back, that one, I'm recording segments of that on a different camera for a separate video that I'm working on, right? So when I was working on that experiment, that gathering footage, I was using this stirring rod to stir that experiment, and the material that was left stuck to the glass stirring rod. It looks like my green lion that I've seen in my many experiments. However, it has a slightly different characteristic to it because, and this has to do with the way it was prepared. You know, different preparations. This one was done in heat with sulfur, so, and wax, of course. So it could be any of those factors could have helped change it, but the green lion usually, in my green lion usually has a wet, waxy appearance. This version of it seems to have the ability to dry more, like slightly differently. Maybe it may be the wax present. It could be it just has a little wax in it, a little wax. But the color, the appearance, you know, caught my attention. And I have a feeling that if I were to begin reaching into this glass with this stirring rod that I've been using, probably going to see some color change. Going to see something, maybe see some green lion, some of my green lion. So let's take a look. Let's see. A little stir. We may not see it right away, but I have a feeling that over the course of the experiments, something, oh yeah, oh yeah, I've got a drop. I'm seeing the greening of the green lion, my green lion. There was a drop on the tip that dripped off. It's slightly coated the outside of the sulfur that was yellow, and now it's got that distinct greenish tint, light coloring, light coating of it. Yeah, and also in the neck of the glass, we can see the material color has darkened a bit, leaning more towards green of the green lion, and less of the yellow, the bright yellow of the sulfur, less of that banana yellow coloring. And down here, this material, the gold coloring has, the yellow coloring and the gold coloring has diminished. It's darkened. It's taken on more of a greening effect. And I think from what I see here, I just think that I should add more iron pyrite, because the primordial soup, as it were, seems a bit thin. There we go. And this is interesting because this fits my understanding of the word imbibition. Technically, this looks like an imbibition. I'm adding a dry material to a wet material, making it a wet path alchemy experiment, but it's still an imbibition. I'm doing an imbibition by adding dry material that's been crushed up. I'm going to remove the funnel once again. Probably don't need to melt it. Maybe bring the camera a little bit closer. It's interesting how the alchemists spoke about mercury. And a lot of people say, they didn't always mean elemental mercury, didn't always mean it at face value, but that in alchemy, mercury means water aspect, which is anything that's a water or a liquid, or could be anything that's molten in liquid state, in liquid form, not necessarily metallic mercury. So it's interesting because now we have material floating on the surface of the liquid, molten liquid, and it has kind of a silvery, it kind of has like a mercurial look to it. Oh, I have like a little island in here. So let's shake it up a bit. Mix it up, stir it up. More green. More greenish, like that of the green lion. My green lion. This reminds me again of the green and golden lion. More darkening. I think what I want to do is turn the heat up a bit. I'm going to add the 5 degrees that I subtracted earlier, bringing it back to 155 degrees Celsius. This is Alchemy of Steven School. Look at the greening, the color. I'm going to give it a little bit more iron pyrite. That looks like a healthy dose. Interesting. Interesting. Right. I'm going to increase the heat by 5 degrees, bringing it to 160 degrees Celsius. The matter has kind of a waxy appearance. I'm going to give it another 5-degree jump, 165 degrees Celsius, and I intend to climb, hopefully, in just a little bit. We'll slowly bring it up to 170. Alright, the temperature dial is no longer flashing, so it has reached 165 degrees. I don't see any bad reactions or negative things occurring, so I'm going to go ahead and increase the other 5 degrees. Bring it to 170 degrees Celsius. Let's see what happens. Remember, this is Alchemy of Steven School. Do not try this at home. I see a bubble forming. Is that a bubble? It looks like a bubble forming on the surface. Yep. Bubbles are forming on the surface and then popping like unto the eyes of fishes. It hasn't quite reached 170 degrees just yet. I think I need to get a light. I need to start looking into getting a light. I put this box together as like a little stage, you know, and it kind of blocks the light out of it. I probably need to get a light to add to it. Alright, it appears that we are at 170 degrees Celsius. The matter does look somewhat different, like more solidified or more waxy, in my opinion. Still quite. This again reminds me of the old saying, mercury in alchemy. Not elemental mercury, but mercury being a liquid aspect. Anything liquid or molten. I'm going to give it 5 more degrees of heat, bringing it up to 175 degrees Celsius. Slowly increasing. I'm going to try sharing this video on Pinterest really quick. Hopefully it will not interrupt the live stream. Reconnecting your live. Hopefully that didn't interrupt the live stream. It may have. But according to what it says here, it looks like we are live. It seems the material has become a little bit more molten, more in a liquid molten state, since I increased the last 5 degrees upgrade in heat. Still not seeing any adverse reactions. That material that's formed like a continent around the rear ridge of the glass, it appears to be beginning to get crystalline shapes or formations upon its surface or in its midst. I'm going to increase the heat again, adding another 5 degrees. I'm bringing it to 180 degrees Celsius. Slowly increasing the heat. It looks like there's changes occurring slowly, which is good because I want to be able to observe the reactions. I'm seeing a little bit more bubbling to the surface again. The continent or land mass, if you will, along the rear of the glass seems to be becoming more defined. The temperature gauge is no longer flashing, so I'm thinking we are at 180 degrees Celsius. The material stuck to the sides of the glass seems to be undergoing slight color change again, as if it's darkening more. I'm going to dip the glass stirring rod again that I've been using with this experiment. Maybe give it a little stir, maybe remove a sample and see what we have. The continent in the back is quite waxy. It has a quite waxy feel to it and seems to melt in heat. Right, dipping into the middle of the molten mass, getting the glass rod hot, and then touching it to the material on the back seems to melt it a bit. And then we have some darkening. The green of the green lion. My green lion. My green and golden lion. Look at that green. The green color is increasing more and more in substance and texture and color, more and more like my green lion of alchemy. Oh, our continent is melting. Our earthy landmass is diminishing. Global warming in my globe here. I think what I'll do is add another 5 degrees to the temperature, slowly bringing it up to 185 degrees Celsius. Just a slow and gradual increase. More melting. More melting is occurring. Getting a better melt. Some of the material on the edges is starting to melt and drip into the center of the mass. I see the melting is gradually increasing. I don't see any negative reactions at the moment. The upper portion of the glass is slightly opaque, whitened, as if um, we've perhaps lost some volatile portion of material. This is quite interesting and quite exciting to me. I am seeing things in my glass that I've seen many years ago, but achieved in a completely different way and in a much shorter time. I'm thinking that the white opaque material in the upper portions of the glass indicates that this process should perhaps be done much slower and with a much more gradual increase with the temperature. I'm thinking that indicates my temperature increases are too quick, and that this experiment perhaps should be much more lengthy and not hastened so much. I'm thinking that the rising of volatile materials is something that probably should be avoided so that there's no loss of substance during phase transition or changes in the material reactions occurring. I'm thinking that the rising of volatile materials really is to be avoided. But to do that, the experiment would have to be slowed down over a much longer period of time. However, still quite valuable today in seeing results, in my opinion. Right now, I'm basically just keeping it in molten fusion, with not all of it being molten, of course. I'm going to see if I can bring a light out here to lighten this up a bit. Alright, I've got a light. It's a bright one. I'm gonna try it out. See what goes on here. Hopefully I won't drop it and break it. It's an expensive light. Let's see what goes on. Hopefully it won't generate too much heat. Sitting on a cardboard box. Look at that. Illumination. Well, I don't know how it shows up in the camera, but from here it looks better. I can see colors better in the material. So far the light puts out a little bit of heat. Okay, I don't see anything drastic. I see subtle changes occurring slowly, but I don't see any drastic negative changes. So I'm considering the possibility of raising the heat by 5 degrees. I think first though I'm going to give it a little stir. Okay, the matter on the bottom of the glass that's in the heat seems to be solidifying somewhat. Like it's becoming somewhat cemented, if you will. So we can get a look at the color on the glass stirring rod. The greening of the material, that classic green lion coloring. That I've seen in metal acetate path alchemy experiments of mine. I'm still considering the temperature. I haven't changed it just yet. I'm gonna go ahead. I'm leaning towards increasing 5 degrees. I think I'm gonna go ahead and just give it 5 degrees, bringing it to 190 degrees Celsius. The pan in the back, the little cast iron skillet, the smaller one, um, does not seem to really be affected by these temperature ranges. It was worked upon in a much higher temperature range of around, according from memory, 340 degrees Celsius. So in these lower temperature ranges, it really doesn't seem to do much in the other experiment. But who knows, maybe we will reach that temperature today if we keep climbing. Depending on what we see in this flask, the higher temperatures showed more drastic changes, more color changes. For instance, like more peacock's tail, more red. I'm thinking it's possible that it could use another imbibition of the dry powdered iron pyrite. It's just what I'm thinking. Oh, a reaction occurring. Something happened. What's going on around the edges? Look at the rear edge back there. Macaroon. Down there at the edge. Interesting. My light doesn't seem to be too hot, just gently warm. More melting. Sorry, Belzy. Sorry, Belzy doggo. Belzo doggo. Interesting. That little jiggling action totally reminded me of the old alchemical word mercury, but not meaning elemental mercury. The little shimmering shimmy shake, like something wanted to solidify. Yet remaining liquid. I see gradual changes. Gradual. I think, in my opinion, the slower the better. The slower the better. Old alchemical manuscripts indicated nothing should be lost. Keeping matter in fusion slowly with lower temperatures, gradually increasing the heat by degrees. So my understanding of that is that the white fume arising in such a situation would be not wanted. It represents something lost from the matter. So perhaps the volatile becoming fixed until it goes up and down, until it becomes fixed and remains below. It's hard to avoid. The rising of the white fume, very hard to avoid. Darkness, look at the darkness, the dark greening at the bottom of the glass. And darkness was upon the face of the deep. Darkness was upon the face of the waters. Green, green. I'm gonna dip the string rod and see what we've got. mushy. It has the texture, a mushy, waxy texture, gaining towards what I've seen in the other experiment with the frying pan in the back, and the frying pan is showing change now too. Material in the little frying pan is starting to melt. I'm thinking that technically the glass globe and the small frying pan should be quite similar, just coming at basically almost the same thing but from different angles. Alright, so there's a drop and it's going to drip right on the hot plate. Look at that waxy, like plastic sulfur. And look at the interesting color now that it's out here where we can directly see it. Interesting. Did you see that? The little bead on the end had a magnetic pull, as if some force was pulling it towards the glass where it came from. But now that we are out here, we can see colors a bit differently. More orangish, as if perhaps it wants to turn red. What will it do? The interesting thing is that it doesn't seem to be burning. Should it be burning 190 degrees Celsius? It's waxy, no fumes arising, acting like the color wants to turn towards perhaps red. I'm just going to leave that alone for a bit so we can see what it does. I'm going to turn the glass a little bit, just in an attempt to mix materials a bit. It does look like there's change occurring, like matter is thickening. It looks like it's thickening, like it's rising dough, like it's baking a cake. And the material, like the dough, is rising and drying and thickening. That's what it looks like. Right along this front edge here, it appears as though a thickening of matter is occurring. And like there's a rising, like materials rising, like dough rising from yeast. Too good to be true? This is just one of my experiments. I'm just observing the results. but in my opinion, it's quite exciting. Remember, this is Alchemy of Steven School. Do not try this at home, not for consumption. That thickening of matter catches my attention, like the rising of Joe. Maybe it's just from the angle I'm looking at. Maybe the glass and the light reflection is playing tricks on my mind. I'm not raising the heat because the volatile portion, that volatile portion, just trying to keep it in fusion. Hopefully letting elements fix before volatile portions escape the glass. So in the future, I think what I'm going to do is try different variations of this experiment, like it says in Lapidus, the book Lapidus in Pursuit of Gold. He suggests in his book for alchemists to try their experiments in different configurations. Just baking my cake slowly. Not a real cake, of course. Not for consumption. I'm going to take a look at that frying pan in the back. It's got some molten action going on. I'm going to try to move it more towards the front out here. Or we could perhaps see it a little bit more. It is warm to the touch. My dog is close to the table. I'll put wedges under the table so hopefully she won't rock it. Hi, baby. You're alright. You're a good girl. Good girl. Good girl. You will go in the house, get in your bed? You will go night-night? You will go to bed and take a nap? Is it nap time? Nap time. It's nap time. For the dog. Alright, so. I see interesting changes in the little frying pan. Um, Needle-like shapes, crystalline type shapes of different forms, almost as if microscopic crystals were beginning to form gradually and slowly. All right. So the material in the glass, it looks thick and waxy and green. I'm thinking what I'm going to do. I'm thinking of giving it 5 degrees more heat. I'm considering it. I'm going to give it. I see a comment. It says, I'm on the process of the true stone at the very moment. That's lovely. I haven't claimed that this is going to make any type of stone, but I want to see the results. I'm just observing. This is just one of my experiments, or some of my experiments. Then I'm going to observe the results. Now, I'm going to just gradually raise the heat to 195 degrees Celsius and see what goes on here. Oh, one thing you've reminded me of with your comment that you're working on your stone, that's lovely. I don't dispute your work in any way, but I hear mention a lot where people speak of one stone, the stone, one stone. This is something. I see your comment. Yes, um, but you know what? Alchemy is like difficult to figure out. It takes a lot of time and patience, and yes, that's what I'm getting at. There are multiple stones. Multiple stones. So in the past, I'm sure I've used the phrase "the stone" or "the philosopher's stone" many times. It's just a stumbling block. It's a stumbling block that's hard to get past sometimes. That the idea, is it one stone or is there several stones? But they're really, I mean, it's plain as day. There's reference to animal stone, mineral stone, plant stone. These right here suggest 3 different stones, and then there's the 7 planetary metals. That suggests 7 different stones. And then, some time ago, in the past year or less, maybe within the last 6 months, I was uh, just digging online, looking, what's going on out there in the alchemy world, and I saw something where someone suggested that one of the ancient or medieval alchemists believed that his stone was made. His opinion was that his stone was made of all the 7 planetary metals combined. That his alchemical formula involved breaking down the metals, separating the ingredients, purifying, perhaps, and then recombining a new stone with ingredients from all 7 planetary metals. It's kind of interesting. I haven't tried it yet. But if gold, the philosopher's golden stone, yes, that's what it was referred to as a gold stone or golden, having to do with gold. In this one, I'm just studying to see the reactions between iron, pyrite, and sulfur, really. Except for the little frying pan in the front, it also has paraffin wax added because wax has come up. Different types of wax has come up in my alchemical researches over the years, in primitive metallurgy, in alchemy, wax comes up here and there. It looks like we're at 195 degrees Celsius. I'm getting notifications in my phone. I guess I should have turned them off. I guess next time I live stream, I need to remember to turn off the notifications first. I'm not sure what'll happen if someone calls me when I'm live streaming. I kind of suspect the phone will ignore it. Yes, my work is everything is very well published. You know, I'm all over YouTube, a lot of videos. I have what I called books on Amazon. Other people have called them booklets. Some people have called them brochures. I've had blog posts all over the internet. I've been working on this stuff since 2008. So I've published many things. On the internet, on YouTube, on WordPress.com, on Amazon. I have a blog. I haven't really been working on my blog much for quite some time, like I used to, but I have a blog. It's Alchemy934 at WordPress.com. And then I have Steven School Alchemy on YouTube. Oh, I just bumped the temperature gauge. Bring it back up. It's there. I've set it at 190 degrees Celsius. I think I'm going to use the glass string rod and give a little stir in the glass egg and see what we get. Initiate of the art. I am not initiated in anything. I am just self-taught. So, you know, I just have studied and researched and contemplated and experimented. And I began this journey in 2008. My first real printed book type publication was called Alchemy and the Green Lion by Steven School on Amazon. And I believe somewhere in there, either on the cover or inside the book, I think it details that I began this journey in 2008 with no teacher. I did not enroll in a school, didn't have a teacher, just trying to figure it out and learn. Look at that mushiness in there. And the volatile portion, of course. All right. That's what we've got. The green. Waxy and green. Let's put a little portion on the hot plate here and see what it looks like. It's melting. I don't see any fumes arising. Doesn't appear to be burning. I'm going to give a little stir in the cast iron frying pan with the other glass string rod. I have two, one for this one and one for that one. I'll keep them separate so that I don't have any mixing between one experiment to the other. Alright, we have some molten melting going on in the other frying pan, and Interesting. Interesting. The other one acts like it wants to show more redness. Let's see what we got on this glass stirring rod. Maybe get it more towards the light. That one is a more darker, pronounced green of my green lion. My green lion. I'm not saying that everyone's green lion is the same. This is just my green lion. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is I'm thinking about raising the heat 5 degrees. Just considering it. I'm going to do it. Okay. Now the temperature gauge is flashing. I've set it to 195 degrees. It flashed, which means we weren't quite there, but it will climb. It's not flashing now. It's only 5 degrees. It shouldn't take long to get there. That iron pyrite in the back is glinting at me. Okay, the temperature gauge is not flashing, so we should be at 195 degrees Celsius. Many paths, yes. In the writings of Paracelsus, he indicated that as well. He said that different alchemists all had their different methods, their different ways, their different paths. I'm not quoting it exact word for word from his writings, but he basically said that different alchemists had their different ways, methods, paths, and that they, in his opinion, they all led to the same thing in the end. And then the general consensus is alchemy is that the ancient alchemists and medieval alchemists is that the longer they studied, the more they learned, the more they figured out. Some of them, of course, poisoned themselves and died. But the ones that didn't, of course, they were just basically said to improve over time through trial and error, learning by their experiments. And that's what I see in my work too. One way that Paracelsus described it in his writings, he said that one will never know our art until they have put their hand to the fire. Basically saying that they must know the utensils like the glasses and stuff, and try the experiments, stuff like that. I see more white volatile material in the glass globe, more opaque whiteness. Something volatile is escaping. So I'm thinking that at some point in the future I'm probably going to recreate that experiment in a closed egg, a closed glass. Slowing it down, of course, much more caution in a closed glass. I'm starting to see some peacock's tail, what it looks like perhaps a peacock's tail. Of course, that, you know what, it's the reflection of the light this time. Notice the material that spilled onto the hot plate. It's kind of like hot molten waxy material. It doesn't really seem to be changing much. It doesn't seem to be burning or smoldering or smoking. At 195 degrees Celsius, it's not really doing a lot of changing from the heat, which is interesting. I'm going to raise the heat by 5 degrees, bringing it to 200 degrees Celsius. Yes, why do I prefer the plate instead of an actual open flame? I've actually done many experiments over the years with both open flame, sand bath, water bath, hot plate, open fire, like a wood fire, a gas fire. Um, so I try my experiments in different ways, different configurations, um, just to see what different results I get. The pyrite in the back, I intend to calcine that. I just have it here in the lower heat settings just to see if I notice any changes occurring and maybe learn something new. I don't really expect to see a lot of changes in it, but I envision it eventually calcining it over a gas fire, a gas flame. Carefully, yes. Alright, the temperature gauge is not flashing, so it indicates that my temperature is at 200 degrees Celsius. Notice the material gathering up here around the neck of the flask. There's like a white material gathering, like a salt, like a volatile salt, collecting. I've seen over the years different people researching, studying, experimenting in alchemy have posted different opinions about this white material collecting up here in the neck of the glass, subliming. In that glass, I only have sulfur and iron pyrite. Could that be? Could it be salt of sulfur? Yes, I see what you're saying there. However, going back to earlier, there was mention of there being more than one stone. So, in my opinion, this particular stone would have to do with the metals. I would never, I don't believe that this particular type of stone would be for plants or animals. I could be wrong, but I'm thinking that alchemists made tinctures from plants, and I think those were more intended. Plants or vegetables or food like salad. Um, I would much rather, if I was going to eat something, I think I would eat something of a plant. Before I would not really intend on eating things from the realm of the metals, so to speak. I'm attempting to exalt this iron pyrite with sulfur to improve it, is what I'm attempting to do. So this is geared towards the metals. It's not geared towards plants or animals. I would not try to make a ingestible tincture out of this. That's why I say not for consumption. No, it's possible that, I mean, there is some if you read like a bottle of vitamins or a cereal label from a box of cereal, it talks about little micro elements that are in there. You know, this is bigger than a micro element. I would not eat any of this, not for consumption. There's a plant that comes up in alchemy a lot, lemon balm, Melissa officinalis. It's supposed to be associated with an alchemical preparation called the primum ens melissae. All right, it looks like we're at 200 degrees Celsius. The material in the frying pan here is more molten, more of a liquid state. Let's see what we got here. Right, coming at the work from different angles. Starting at the beginning and working forward, or starting at the end and working backwards. With this, I'm just really experimenting to see what results I get. True. True. It's the learning curve, in my opinion. It's one way to describe it. Learning by trial and error. All right. There's a little bit of material stuck to the top of the glass from the glass string rod. I'm going to throw it on the hot plate and see what it does. It appears to be melting, like wax. The color is somewhat reddening. Kind of an orangish, goldish, reddish color. All right. It's 200 degrees Celsius is what's indicated on the temperature dial. Thank you. I feel that doing this slowly is key, but I feel that eventually by slowly increasing the heat by degrees, color changes will continue to occur. I'm really contemplating giving it a 5-degree increase of heat. There it is. I've added 5 degrees. 5 degrees. That white material in the neck of the glass is quite interesting. You know, old alchemical manuscripts have mentioned such a thing many times, calling it different things, like like unto the congelation of a frosty vapor, or a white hard rime. Because of the ingredients that I have in the glass, I'm thinking it to be a salt of sulfur, a volatile salt of sulfur. Which would be quite interesting. Yes, I understand. Revelations is alchemical text. Yes, I agree. What is your opinions of it? I have posted, about that many times in my publications all over the internet and Amazon and YouTube. Posted different things about that. My blog, um, alchemy934 at wordpress.com. It is interesting, and I've heard many other people say they feel it's alchemical in nature. Yes. I just seen like a whiff of vapor arise from something. I think it came from the frying pan. Unless, uh, unless I'm wrong about that. Could be wrong. The material in the pan seems quite molten. The material that's dripped onto the hot plate still seems to really not be changing much at this time. It's not burning, it's not smoking or smoldering. It looks waxy in appearance. Interesting. So you're saying the first 7 chapters of Revelations. According to this temperature dial, it indicates that I'm at 205 degrees Celsius, well above the melting point of sulfur. Interesting, yes. That matches some of the writings of Theophrastus Paracelsus, where he talks about distilling materials and different things, different coming over the helm. Interesting. Interesting. It sounds like you are quite knowledgeable. 205 degrees. I don't see a lot going on except for the congelation of the frosty vapor in the neck of the glass. I think what I'm going to do is raise the heat by 5 degrees. It's according to the temperature dial, it's at 205 degrees Celsius. I'm going to add 5 degrees and just bring it to 210 degrees. Now the mosquitoes are coming out. The temperature gauge is no longer flashing, indicating that my temperature should be at 210 degrees Celsius. The flash. Yeah, the flash that's coming. Ah, sounds like I need some eye protection. It sounds like I need to be wearing a face shield, which I actually probably should. I do have one. I understand what you're saying. I was actually just thinking about that. Almost as if you read my mind. 210 degrees Celsius. You don't see any negative effects occurring. Bloodstones. Blood is interesting in alchemy. And you know, I feel that geology is just a section of alchemy. And there's a guy on YouTube that's really um, into stuff that's um, like primitive geology or a good understanding of it, like how the earth was formed and the rocks and stuff. And his YouTube channel is called Mud Fossil University, and he talks a lot about blood. Um, that's it's interesting. I would think about like watching his videos and checking him out a bit. Not as a, it's not like he's doing alchemy. You know, it's not like he's making stones from blood, but he has some interesting opinions about uh, like things. How should I say it? Petrifying, petrified materials in the earth, and blood being one of the constituents, you know, of petrified material. Some of the petrified material. It's really interesting. Blood. My understanding is blood contains iron. Iron is associated with gold, and what he talks about kind of seems like it's pointing in that same direction. Same direction. Mud Fossil University is interesting. But as far as making stones from blood, I haven't done any alchemical experiments with blood. I have thought about making a video explaining some theories and hypotheses that I have in that area. Sort of a whiteboard type video, just explaining theories and hypotheses of mine concerning alchemical things relating to blood. I'm going to have to get a whiteboard to do that with some dry erase markers. Oh, I see. Yes, a transfer of consciousness. Well, what he talks about, though, relating to blood, he talks about stuff like the way the earth was formed, which is really deep, and the way the things in the ground are formed, like you know, trees. Um, I've heard the term petrified wood. So, in my opinion, a tree that dies could decompose into the ground, or perhaps you could become petrified wood. Well, he suggests that living things, like carcasses of living things like mammals or giants or whatever, that theory applies to them also. That, you know, when things die, they could actually decompose or petrify. Petrified flesh, petrified. He talks about petrified blood vessels, and the blood either in them or not in them. It's really deep, really deep. So I have a rock over here that might help explain it better. It's a big rock. I'm going to see if I can bring it over here and set it on the table so we can see it. Oh, it's cemented. Okay, the rock is actually, I'm not going to be able to bring it over here, so I'm going to take the camera over there briefly. Okay, so there's the rock. It's a gray rock. It's got lines through it, white lines, patterns. Okay, I see a lot of whiteness in the lines, and I see a little bit of red tint or pinkish tint here and there. not in all the lines, but in some of them. So the way it works, um, he was suggesting that the rock is actually part of a living thing that died, like a mammal or something, some creature that died, and this portion of its body became petrified. So the gray area represents petrified flesh. The white lines represent petrified blood vessels. If they are white, then they were drained of blood. There was no blood in them. But the sections that still had blood during the process of becoming petrified, um, the areas that had blood would be pinkish or reddish, indicating the iron content in the blood. Okay, and this also, if you study hard rock mining, um, this also fits that because miners, they would look for quartz veins and follow them. And supposedly the white quartz, was just an indicator that they follow, and hoping to follow it to the rose quartz, which is pinkish or reddish, showing iron stain. And they would follow that, trying to lead them to the gold in the hard rock mines. So the Mud Fossil University guy, he was saying, that he had a video saying something about how to find gold in the earth or something, and he was suggesting the same thing of following the white lines. At least in my memory, I could be wrong. My understanding of it is what he was getting at was follow the white lines towards the pinkish colored, reddish colored material when looking for gold in the Earth's crust. So that's rather interesting. Rather interesting. Look at the white lines. Could those be? Those could totally be petrified blood vessels. That's what they look like. A main blood vessel coming through, smaller blood vessels branching off. Some varicose veins over there becoming petrified. Totally looks like a... If you ever go to the grocery store and look at a roast, it reminds me of a roast. It looks like a slab, like a big chunk of meat that became petrified. And so was the world created. So there's been like mention of of a turtle with the world on its back or something like that, crawling around, and that matches what Mud Fossil University was saying as far as how the Earth was created. He suggested, and he said that this actually was written in the Bible too. He said that so this area out here that we call space, right? See that arrow? This area is space. In the space, there's things that take up space, like that chair right there. It's taking up that space. That is an empty space that is now taking up that chair is taking up that empty space. Animal stones, yes, I have deep insight into animal stones of alchemy. So anyway, his theory, he was explaining about how the world was created, and it matches, the old pictures I've seen of like a turtle with the world on its back. He's saying that basically a living being was in space, and it died, and there it was, its dead carcass. And its dead carcass in space, that it just began, sections of it began decomposing, rotting, petrifying, sections petrifying, forming mineral deposits in its carcass. And then my understanding, just what I kind of add to it, my own opinion, is then parasites would be hatching and developing out of the rotting carcass, the rotting sections, which are more living things that would be living on the carcass, and doing their life cycle, which would actually help speed up the process of decomposition and mineral deposits forming, because the living creatures would be, fertilizing the soil, as it were. And then they die, and they add to the mass. And then their carcass, sections of it decomposes, and sections petrify, adding to the mass. And that this process is basically how the world was created, from just a dead carcass in a circle of life. He's basically saying that the world is nothing but a pile of dead carcasses, and that this is written somewhere in the Bible. I've done a lot of reading in the Bible, but I don't think I read that section. Of course, there are supposed to be some missing books from the Bible and stuff, and I think the Bible has been edited. Now that could be a subject for controversy. There's probably people that want to argue about it, but my opinion, I think the Bible's been edited. I think sections have been removed that someone didn't want us to see, something modified or changed. And somebody told me that in the past. They were telling me something along the same lines, and they were quoting the King James Bible. Okay, so if there's a King James version, then this right here suggests editing in the Bible, doesn't it? If there's a King James version, there must be another version preceding that, and then this just suggests editing. Okay, so the only major changes I'm seeing right now are just more of the white fume, the congelation of a frosty vapor, as it were, a white hard rime developing in the neck of the glass. In both, I've seen it in both. More so in this one. It's more pronounced in this one because this has the glass for it to adhere to. And in the writings of Sendivogius, I remember him saying somewhere, he was talking about something, saying it adheres to the glass. Interesting. Yes, that's sounds good what you were saying. Yes, the word God. So other people have different words they use that supposedly mean the same thing. God is just a word that like different words could mean the same thing. Forever expanding. Interesting. Alright, look at the white fume rising in the frying pan. Let's get this white fume coming off of that. Coming off of it. These temperatures are interesting. Interesting temperatures. I'm learning from my experiments here. I'm learning how I could make changes or improvements. My hot plate works in 5-degree increments. It doesn't do 1-degree increments. I want to increase the heat slowly because I don't want to have an adverse reaction. I want to see what occurs to learn from this experience. And my hot plate only the digital meter on my hot plate there, it says 210 degrees Celsius right now. If I turn the dial, it makes changes in 5-degree increments. It won't, like at 210 degrees, if I turn the dial up, it won't say 211, 212, 213. It only says 210, 215, 220, etc., so on and so forth from 0. And I believe this hot plate is supposed to go up to 400 degrees Celsius. Well, the material in the glass is molten. Sounds like my dog wants to come outside. It's molten and it's waxy and it's liquid and it's green, like the green lion of alchemy. I'm going to turn my coffee pot off really quick because it's been on for quite a while. And I'll be right back. Alright. The temperature gauge is flashing. It says 210 degrees. It flashed briefly, now it stopped, so it just must have reheated itself back to 210 degrees. There is more white fume arising. Oh, that looks quite interesting in the frying pan. Quite interesting. Like rivers of molten liquid changing colors. I'm going to stir it a bit, and then I'm just dipping the stirring rod so I can get a color sample too. See what colors we've got going on in here. Dark waxy green, like a green lion of alchemy. Like a dark green waxy material. Dragon's blood. I would say that this material definitely does contain the substance, in my opinion, that alchemists associate with the term dragon's blood. By further processing this material, in my experience, I mean, I've shown um, in my works in the past red oil and red this and red that, and so, from my experience, yes, I'd say this does contain the substance that alchemists refer to as dragon's blood. Could it be the rosy color, what they also call the rosy colored blood of the green lion? Could be. It's in here. And from what I've seen, it's exalted by heat. Stirring, stirring, stirring. Looks like color changes to me. It looks to me like color changes are mingled in with the green, making them harder to see, but they are slowly exalted or clarified over time through increases of heat. There we go. Okay. I think maybe I'm going to increase the heat by 5 degrees. There, I've raised the temperature dial to 215 degrees Celsius. 215 degrees Celsius. So this is giving me insight. I'm learning from what I'm doing here. I'm just conducting an experiment, or maybe more than one experiment on the same hot plate, just to see the results and see what I learn from it. And this is giving me insight. I think I'm going to turn the heat down. As a matter of fact, my intuition is just telling me to begin turning it down, turning it all the way to the off position. I'm going to let this cool and see what I've got. And the indicator that has caused me to come to this assumption is the coloring here, in my opinion, seems to be becoming more yellow. Interesting. It could be a good sign, it could be a bad sign. What was white seems to be becoming yellow with the additional heat. Another thing I noticed is the material that was left on the hot plate. This section over here seems to be gone. The section over here seems to be gone. And these little beads here indicate to me that it looks like it beaded up and rolled off the hot plate. It appears to have beaded up and rolled off the hot plate. That's not why I want to turn the heat down. I'm doing these experiments gradually in stages. So this one I actually began on a different day and was recording segments of it on a different camera, which I have published only portions of it, but not all of it yet. because I'm recording it in different segments on different days to see what happens. And some people have mentioned that on some of my videos they want to see like something from beginning to end. So that's why I'm recording segments of this work on a different camera, so that I can try to piece together an entire video of experiments starting from beginning to end, instead of like publishing, because some videos are published as a series, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes people want to see something from the start to the finish in one video. Those tend to be lengthy though, sometimes, it could be, but not always. Now this material in the frying pan is acting like it wants to turn red. The molten portion is dark. So I really what I was wanting to see in this experiment is, does molten sulfur affect or cause changes in iron pyrite? Does it dissolve it? Does it become caustic and dissolve the iron pyrite like a dissolving water? Does it bond with the iron pyrite and multiply it, increasing its quality or virtue? Does it have color changes? Do changes occur involving whether or not it'll stick to a magnet, whether or not it'll rust, whether or not it's affected by heat or fire, whether or not there are color changes, things of this nature. And stirring the frying pan is interesting because some of the material is sticking to the glass rod, which is changing the context, I don't know if that's the right word, of the material that's left in the frying pan. It looks different in the frying pan now, as if a lot of the molten material was gathered up here and solidified, and then the material in the frying pan left like more of a drier substance. Of course, that could be because I turned off the heat. That could be affecting it too. It could be just cooling and solidifying. Cooling and solidifying is going to be interesting to examine, especially in the clear glass. Because with the clear glass, it's like a window that we can see through. There we go. I just took that blob of green off, pulled the whole thing off of there, put it back into the frying pan, and it looks red at the edge, reddish at the edge. So the material in the glass is still molten. Interesting. It's still in a molten liquid state. And even though the heat has been turned off. I would have expected it to perhaps solidify quicker, but it's not. It will, though. You let the hot plate cool down more. I'm looking through the comments here. They disappear from the screen. I gotta try to bring them back. I'm reading. It was said before the start of the Golden Age, the stone would be given to all those willing to listen. The recipe is freely handed out by both my teachers these days. Okay, that's cool. I'm not sure who your teachers are, but my opinion is that alchemy was common knowledge at one time, that pretty much everybody knew it, and that nowadays it's suppressed technology. It's been suppressed. It's trying to make a comeback now. A lot of people are oblivious to it, like they don't want to hear it. But in my opinion, alchemy was once widely known. What is whispered in your ear? Shout from the rooftops. The golden age is near, brother. Very interesting. Yes, the golden age is near. The golden age. Many people have suggested that same thing, and I tend to agree. I don't disagree with it. But I do think that alchemy was widespread common knowledge at one time. And that perhaps there were people in the world who wanted to covet the knowledge for themselves and try to remove it from the rest of society, to exalt themselves, to make themselves appear more like gods among men, when at first, when everyone knew alchemy, in my opinion, everyone was more equal. But nowadays, that most don't even want to hear about alchemy. It's known by few. It's like somebody has a leg up, so to speak. The ignorant and the wise comes to mind. Interesting. So things are starting to cool. There's a little bubble in the middle of the, or a few little bubbles coming to the surface in this glass. They come to the surface and then some of them seem to pop. The larger one seems to be getting smaller, like it's dissipating. Like it didn't just pop, but it's like somehow dissipating. Bubbling like unto the eyes of fishes comes to mind. So the material that's on the hot plate is cooling also. It looks like it's still molten. The color is also changing due to the reduction in heat. It's reverting back to more of a glassy yellow, waxy color. Sulfur is something, like I say, this is Alchemy of Steven School. Do not try this at home. Sulfur, some people have told me, be careful with sulfur. The fumes, like of burning sulfur, are said to be, deadly poison, like the breath of the dragon. It slays everything in its path. It's, not something to work with carelessly. Brimstone. The hot plate is still warm. I'm trying to splash some of the molten material up on the sides, since the glass is like a window, so that as it coagulates and cools, we can see it better, see what we've got. There we go, so that we've got some. Try to see the different elements. The sulfur has an interesting appearance. The color, it seems like the texture seems more crystalline, like little crystal shapes or formations trying to take form. And the color right now is rather more intense, of a yellow, like a wet, waxy, crystalline, glassy banana yellow, more pronounced than it was at the beginning. Of course, that could change with the cooling. Interesting. It's like crystalline salt formations occurring in there. Alright, so by taking it up and moving it like that, it seems to have helped to solidify the material more. Perhaps I should reach in with the glass stirring rod and just take a color sample. I'm going to use the clean end here. This, you see, this is the end I've been dipping into it. This other end hasn't been dipped into it, so I'm calling it the clean end. Let me just reach in and take a little sample. I see green, like unto my green lion. I see yellow, like unto sulfur. The sulfur itself the color seems to have changed though, taking on somewhat of a golden greenish tint, a greenish gold. More of a greenish gold. Or green gold comes to mind. I remember reading an old alchemical text a long time ago and seeing a term about our green gold. This is looking interesting. Perhaps I could zoom in a bit with the camera. This tripod is not the greatest. The color of this sulfur has changed. It appears to have taken some green lion coloring from the iron pyrite. Hopefully that's not too blurry in the camera. Hopefully it's somewhat clear and visible. I think the lighting probably could have been better. Maybe if I move things around a bit, maybe that'll help the lighting. Alright. So let's bring this up here and see if it's still molten. Alright, the molten qualities seem to be dissipating from this glass. I see what appears to be crystalline needle-like shapes in there. Definitely crystalline needle-like shapes in there. Reactions occurring. Too bad the glass is frosty. I could probably get a better view if it wasn't. Outside of YouTube, I don't really spend a lot of time usually in my email. So this probably is actually a decent place to chat. The comments are on in my live stream, but nowadays, when I upload videos, the comments are turned off. Somebody suggested that that nowadays, that it's best on YouTube videos to leave the comments off for various reasons. Which is the only reason they're off. And at one time, I had gone through my channel and deleted a bunch of videos, and people were asking what happened to your old videos. And it was basically, changes in the rules came around at one point in time, and I wanted to go through my YouTube channel and make sure that it complied with the new rules. And I had so many videos that it would be a lengthy process to edit all of them, the settings and everything. So I had gone through and just started deleting a whole bunch of the older videos, which I regret, since I don't have them on, any backup or anything. So, and then somehow, my plan was to leave the comments off, just leave them off, because that's what somebody recommended nowadays with the new YouTube rules and stuff. So, but when I turned the comments off, it affected the growth of the channel drastically as a direct result. It really subdued like the views, the subscriber count, interaction with the channel, because communication is key. People want to comment and get replies and discuss things back and forth. That really affected the channel. So at some point I turned the comments back on, but I just recently went back to the advice that I was given, where people said that nowadays, when uploading videos on YouTube, a lot of people are recommending leaving the comments off, for various reasons. So this material here was, I took the paraffin wax and melted it with sulfur to combine the two, and then let that cool and form into a cake. And then here I ground iron pyrite in a mortar and pestle, this mortar and pestle over here. And then I heated that iron pyrite in this pan, is what I did. And then I started casting chunks of that solidified material onto it. which affected interesting changes, most of which I recorded on a different camera for a video that I'm working on. But if you look at the thumbnail image that I posted on this video, the thumbnail image is actually a picture from those experiments. And when I was doing them, I saw color changes like the peacock's tail, red coloring, things of that nature, which were rather interesting. Okay, so that over there seems to be solidified. If you can look at the pictures because I've posted them on my YouTube channel. There's a community section on my YouTube channel where I post pictures and links to videos and little paragraphs of words and stuff. If you go over there and look at the pictures, I believe I have posted pictures of some of the pictures of when I was working on that experiment, showing the color changes and stuff. I posted a preview. It was posted as a preview of an upcoming video. Yes. So over here, yes, it's solidifying into like needle-like, shard-like crystalline formations in the glass. Pictures. I don't know if you can post pictures on my YouTube channel. I know if you go to the community section and see the posts I have over there, you can comment on them, but I don't know if it'll let you post a picture. That'd be interesting to find out. Yeah, crystalline needle-like formations, different shapes and striations, almost like crystals want to form. The shape of the crystals reminds me of a process involving the purification of potassium nitrate, where it's heated in and dissolved in water, and then filtered, and then evaporated down to a super saturated solution, and then placed in the cold so the crystals reform. And the process is supposed to purify it, and then but the shape of it in the process, it comes out as like needle-like crystalline salt formations and stuff, kind of like what I'm seeing in here, which is interesting. Okay, so this is pretty much cooled down. I think I'm going to start wrapping it up and start putting things away. I think I'm going to conclude this video, and then I'm not sure when I'm going to resume another live stream. I'd like to start doing it more often, but I think I'm going to wrap this one up. True, I agree with what you're saying, but what I'm thinking is that perhaps now the stone is mainly, or these stones are mainly in the hands of the wrong people, and really for equality, for the sake of equality, perhaps it should go back to being in the hands of all the people. The few that have it, I mean, maybe they really deserve it. I'm sure they think they do. Maybe. I'm sure some of these people out here that don't have it are good-hearted people. Some are not, for sure. Some are not. But the shallow people like that, they don't even look twice at alchemy. They want instant gratification. They get angry. They use anger as a tool to pry information. They figure if they explode with anger that you'll just cave in and tell them everything they want to know right now, and they don't have the patience to go any deeper. And alchemy certainly takes patience. Without patience, Alchemy is not a good subject to get into without having great patience, in my opinion. So anyway, this is Alchemy of Steven School. Do not try this at home. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for updates. I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. Thank you for watching, and have a nice day.